And there came a time known as the third millennium, a time when the people of the earth were ravaged by disease, pestilence, and poisons. A time when a special man came forward, a man whose name is Yahweh Ben Yahweh.
My name is Yahweh Ben Yahweh. I am the one the whole earth has been waiting on.
I started seeing things that made me go,
Two men were shot to death early this morning at the complex, taken over by Yahwehs.
The identification or orders to go out to and find an individual and murder him and bring back a body part, usually an ear.
More than a dozen murders and fire bombings of a number of homes in Delray Beach.
Shame. It doesn't work. We're black. Look, the skin color, same as mine. Why? Why did y'all do it? Is it worth it now? Are you happy?
The Yahweh's leader, who claims to be the son of God, Yahweh Ben Yahweh, was arrested by the FBI in New Orleans, where he was on a speaking tour.
I can speak a little Japanese. Want to hear me say something? How many want to hear me speak a little Japanese right quick? Okay. All right. Toyota, Nissan, Sony, Mitsubishi.
How are you? Today I want to talk about Yahweh Ben Yahweh. O-M Yahweh. So, oh my gosh, shut up. So I thought I did something there, but I didn't. I did nothing. So Yahweh Ben Yahweh was the leader of the nation of Yahweh. His ex-members, many of them, call it a cult. The thing is, not only is he accused of being a cult leader, but ex-members also accuse him of masterminding at least 14 murders, including a beheading. But other people who are still loyal to him, they see him more as a victim of a setup by the government. They basically say that he was becoming too popular, and so he was framed, and that he actually did good things for the community, which is true. Like, he created grocery stores and schools and community services in a community that didn't have those things. At its peak, it had tens of thousands of members, and they had amassed a fortune, according to the Miami Herald, of over $100 million, mostly in real estate. In 1980, the group buys a building and they convert it into what they call the Temple of Love. But really, people who left there called it the Temple of Fear. There is a story that an ex-member tells about these weird forced circumcisions that occurred, that Yahweh Ben Yahweh himself performed. He had what he called his circle of 10, and these were like 10 bodyguards that surrounded him. They also had these 6-foot wooden staffs and steel machetes. I'm gonna read you the quote. Okay. At this time, he wasn't called Yahweh Ben Yahweh. By the way, he was called Ak Moshe. He wanted to see who was circumcised and who was not. For those who were not, he squatted in front of them and did the deed to them himself, one by one. One of the rules they had was they had to make money, right? Bring in money to the group, and that was a $10 daily minimum. If they failed, however, they would have to go to somewhere known as the Room of Understanding. A former member describes the Room of Understanding. He says, basically, you're on a concrete floor with a thin layer of carpet. You were made to kneel down on your knees and keep your back straight for 4 or 5 hours. In that room, there were also guards with sticks that made sure you stayed like you were supposed to. The other thing that Yahweh would do is he would basically take the men's wives away from them.
He even regulated our sex life because he taught something called brothers class. He told the brothers the only time you should want to have sex with a woman is if you're trying to make a baby. We go weeks and months without having sex. In hindsight, I found out that he basically wanted my wife. I stayed a full-time member with the Yahwehs because I believed in it. I believed, everything was good.
First, he would send the men to start a temple in another state. So they would be gone. Then he had these classes that were midwife classes, okay? And he would lead the women in genital examinations, and he would also place their mouth on another's private area to give CPR to the unborn child. I'm sorry it's getting so graphic so fast, but this is like the mild stuff. I haven't even gotten into like the crazy murders, okay? Which I don't know which is worse. Anyway, it says he would ask how many of the sisters would mind having the king's seed as an invitation to oral sex on himself. Then came the killing, okay? So now it's 1981. This is the first killing that we know of. Some people say there's more, but it started when there was a former member of the group. This person decided they didn't agree with what Yahweh Ben Yahweh was doing, and so they were going to create their own like offshoot branch, and they were going to take 16 of the members with them. So Yahweh was pissed. Hi guys. Ooh, voice crack. This video is sponsored by EveryPlate. As you guys know, EveryPlate has been supporting my channel for a while now, and I love them. Basically, EveryPlate is a meal kit delivery system. It's by the makers of HelloFresh, so you got that same quality. However, the price is way better. It's actually 25% cheaper than grocery shopping and 58% cheaper than your average fast casual meal. And the way they do this is by making the meals more simple. They don't skimp on quality. They even have this new thing they're doing where it's 15 minutes or less, recipes that really only take 15 minutes or less. And there's things like pimento style grilled cheese sandwiches or smoky cumin pork tacos. And as always, you can customize your EveryPlate meals. You could do different proteins. You can add different sides. So the recipe that I tried was really good. It was the chicken breast with the buffalo spiced panko crust, and then there was like ranch on it too. It was like a hot wing, had like a baby with a chicken breast, and then they had like panko was invited. It was really good. And then there was mashed potatoes, and I really liked the honey roasted carrots as well. So if you guys are interested, use my code. You will get $1.49 per meal by going to everyplate.com and entering the code Noor149. That's $1.49 per meal by going to everyplate.com and entering code Noor149. Thank you so much to EveryPlate for supporting my channel, and thank you guys for watching. Back to the video. He called them the hypocrites, and he basically said that their killing was justified. But then one of those people, the defectors, his name is Aston Green. He comes back to the Temple of Love. This is on November 14th, 1981, and he wants to speak to Moshe, as he's known at the time, but he isn't there. But you know who is there? His circle of 10, or also there's another group, they're known as the Death Angels. This person who witnessed this is someone who testified against Yahweh in court and ended up having to go into witness protection, but now he's out of witness protection program, and he talks about this case openly. His name is Amani. He remembers this. He says, I saw a hammer. He's just being pounded out on the floor. I could still hear him breathing with that sound of death. They wrapped him in a rug with tape around his face and shoved him into the trunk of a car. Then he said he saw the chief of security grabbing a machete. They all get in the car and they go. Then all of a sudden, police discover a body in the Everglades that was basically decapitated, okay? It says here, cops find a head and body pieces. It was Aston Green. He was decapitated and found in the Florida Everglades. His face was bruised, his left eye swollen shut, and his body was covered in shoe marks. He was roommates with a married couple. They were all very close, all three of them. Carlton Carey and Mildred Banks, that's the couple. Carlton and Mildred, they had defected with him. And so when they found out that he was basically beheaded and left in the Everglades, they went to police saying that they think the nation of Yahweh are behind this killing. Well, word gets back to Yahweh Ben Yahweh, and he orders a hit. They were ambushed in their home, like actually outside of their front door. Carrie ends up getting killed, the husband. The wife, she is shot and stabbed with a machete, but she's found by her neighbors, and they take her to the hospital, and she did this interview.
I remember coming to and seeing them drag Michelle out, and I remember saying to myself, they are going to cut his head off. And I remember saying to myself, I gotta get help, but the phones were down.
Based on those 3 murders, everyone else who was involved with the cult was terrified to speak out. And the next murders that happened, nobody really kind of talks or reports about any of them. And that's how they get away with so many for so long. At this point, he's preaching that these people, should die and that he's not going to be punished for it. And then they do, and he's not. And so the followers are believing that they're on this righteous mission, and anyone who gets in their path is going to be taken down, and God is on their side. And he hasn't made himself God yet. That's coming though. The next year after this is when the whole Yahweh Ben Yahweh character comes to be. And there's lots of characters that came before, which I'll get into. But he basically has this moment where he tells them, he was calling himself Yeshua for a while. And so he's got 300 people around him, and he's saying who am I? Who am I? And then I guess one of them says, Yahweh, Yahweh Ben Yahweh, God, the Son of God, God.
Hey, Yahweh, 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 Yahweh.
And then they're all screaming and oh my God and crying and wailing. And basically he tells them I am the Messiah. Now they're straight up believing he's God.
And then he told us that I am the only God that you're ever going to see. You looking at God.
So what do they want to do for God? Apparently in 1984, they wanted to do a human sacrifice for God. Now this was a homeless guy. His name was Attilio Sikala. He was found stabbed 8 times in the chest and abdomen outside of the cult's temple in Newark. This happened a few days before Yahweh was meant to visit that particular temple in Newark. And according to prosecutors, the cult members did this as a sacrifice, for their God. How some people in some religions, which are very accepted, Abrahamic religions, they'll slaughter a sheep for a holiday, for God, or a lamb. So I guess this homeless guy, they did, they did. I mean, the vegans will say, what's the difference? But I mean, the law doesn't. That happened in 1984. Now it's 1986, and it's going to get even worse. This is back in Miami, which is where they're headquartered. There was a firebombing of a neighborhood, Delray Beach neighborhood, and 2 children were injured in this firebombing. This was done to frighten them because Yahweh was gaining popularity and members and money. He started buying up property, tons of property. He would actually buy communities, majority of communities. And he would go in there and kind of intimidate everyone, change it up, fix it up, get rid of everyone, put in his members, and just kind of take over essentially. And they said he would use intimidation tactics such as bombing them or killing them, which we'll see happened in another apartment building. So this was 5 months after that firebombing. Okay, but this was in Opalaka. This was an apartment complex, and this was a very poor neighborhood, and he buys up the entire apartment complex, and his members come in and they basically evict everyone. And most of the people went, they were upset but scared, and so they left. But there were 2 men who not only were upset and didn't want to be evicted, but they went to media and they spoke out. And they were both killed.
Anthony Brown was one of 80 residents of an apartment complex that was bought by a controversial religious sect. The members called themselves Yahweh, or Black Israelites. They lost no time in cleaning up their new property and trying to evict tenants.
I'm going to stay here until I get eviction notice. I don't care what they say. I do, because they ain't going in. Just as simple as that.
Less than 12 hours later, Brown and another man who had resisted eviction had been shot to death.
The members who had previously identified themselves as belonging to the Yahweh sect gunned 2 tenants down.
The victims, 37-year-old Rudolph Broussard and Anthony Brown, apparently argued with Yahweh members just hours before they were found shot several times in the head and back. Witnesses say sometime after midnight, a green car entered the complex. There was a confrontation and shots rang out. Broussard died at the scene. Brown was heard pleading for his life as he tried to escape. Sources say he was shot once in the back, then 3 more times in the head. He died 2 hours later at Jackson Memorial. Police have impounded the car with several white robes in the back seat.
It's a shame. It doesn't work. We're black. Look, the skin color, same as mine. Why? Why did y'all do it?
Anthony Brown and Rudolph Broussard were killed, the police showed up. When the police showed up, they saw a man hiding, and he was wearing like the white turban and the garb that the Nation of Yahweh followers wear. So they take him in for questioning and they ask him, who are you? And he tells them that I am actually Nehariah Israel and I'm 404 years old. And then they're like, no, but really, who are you? And then he's like, actually, I'm Robert Rogier and I used to play football professionally. Come to find out, he was a cult member since the 80s and he was responsible for the killing. Yahweh's response is to excommunicate Robert. Now, this would later come back to bite him in the ass. In the meantime, what is going on? Still more killings. There are these group within the group of Nation of Yahweh known as the Brotherhood. And then there's another group known as the Death Angels. And it's like a secret group within a secret group with a secret group, okay? And there was like this test that he would put his followers through to become part of the Brotherhood or the Death Angels. He told them, you know, like, bring me proof that you killed a white devil. And so they would come back with like the ear. And there is this quote that is so creepy. It says, one day a member walked into the temple and handed Yahweh Ben Yahweh an ear. Amani watched him toss the severed body part in his hand like a toy ball. Praise Yahweh, he said approvingly. That double murder kind of put a stain on the reputation. So in addition to excommunicating Robert, he also goes on this like public relations campaign where he is really spending a lot of money creating more community services and also hobnobbing with the local politicians. The mayor of Miami ends up actually giving Yahweh Ben Yahweh the key to the city and naming October 7th, 1990 Yahweh Ben Yahweh Day. Okay, this is how far he had risen up and how respected he was in the community. A month after this, he gets arrested by the FBI with other members of his when they raid their temple.
Members of a so-called religious sect were once honored for fighting drugs and saving inner-city buildings. Now they face criminal charges.
Police helicopter bathed the building in light. SWAT teams stormed the front door.
You in there, come on out! The FBI!
Lots of men, machine guns, guns in the face.
The reason he got arrested is because Robert, who did the killings, who he excommunicated, and other ex-members, including Amani and others, all turned against him and started cooperating with police and telling them about the killings, about the crimes that were happening. And before I tell you the crazy court thing that happens where people started dying connected with the courthouse and stuff, you need to know the backstory. Before he was Yahweh Ben Yahweh, he was actually Hulan Mitchell Jr. That's how his birth name. He was the first of 15 children. Okay, his father was a Pentecostal minister. According to Yahweh Ben Yahweh, he knew he was divine at the age of 3. And he really suffered and had like a bad memory and anger of the racial discrimination that he faced growing up, being born in 1935, right, in Oklahoma.
You are in for tough time, rough going. Don't you wonder if you're going to be mistreated. You're going to be mistreated until you return to your God. See, Yahweh gave white folks the right to beat you until you come home.
So he went to a segregated public school. Then he served in the Air Force. Then he earned a psychology degree. And they say he studied law at the University of Oklahoma, but he didn't get a degree. He did, however, get a master's degree in economics from Atlanta University. When he was in Atlanta University, the teachers considered him to be brilliant. Like, they found him to be really smart and really charming. That is when his first persona came to be, and he started preaching Christianity, and he called himself Father Michael. He then really gets into civil rights, and at first he was kind of doing the sit-ins and the peaceful marches and stuff, but then he kind of got disillusioned with Martin Luther King, and it's said that he called him a dead dog preacher. Okay. After all that, he decides to go to Chicago and he joins the Nation of Islam, and he has a new name now. Instead of Father Michael, he's Hulan Shah.
The brothers attacked then, but upon talking with the brothers, we found that they had been viciously set upon and attacked and beaten by the police department here. And then they were then sent to the hospital, greatest hospital, and being brought back, they were beat again, viciously and inhumanly, kicked about the body, kicked in the ribs, and beaten about the head in the elevator, up to the top floor and back. Then they were put into their individual cells.
What plan of action will you take against the police department?
Well, we have lodged a formal complaint with the FBI department and also the Department of Justice, Washington, D.C. And we expect to be in court with our attorneys. We are legally represented by an attorney.
Is he a member of the Muslim group here in Atlanta?
All black people are Muslims.
Is he a card-carrying Muslim?
We don't carry cards.
Then after that, that fizzled out, and he moved to Orlando, and he started calling himself Brother Love. And then it wasn't until 1976 when he goes to Miami, and that's when he decides to do the Black Hebrew thing. So he went from Christian to Muslim to Black Hebrew. So just, hitting all the points. So this is when he calls himself Brother Moses, and he starts the Nation of Yahweh. He also takes this woman with him who her real name is Linda Murphy Gaines. He met her in Orlando, but she would take the name Judith Israel, and that's what all his followers would take, the last name Israel. It would be like a biblical name, Israel. Then something happened in Miami. It was 1979, and a guy named Arthur McDuffie, he was an insurance agent, and he got chased by police. He was riding a motorcycle after running a red light, and they beat him to death. The officers get acquitted, and there's riots that go on. So in the context of this racial tension that's going on in Miami, here comes Brother Moses preaching the Black Hebrew doctrine, I guess you would say, where it's saying that the original Jews were black, and the God is black, like Jesus was black, and that we don't want to connect or associate with the government and the structure as it is because it's oppressive, and we need to do our own thing. He ends up getting lots of followers because of this quickly in Miami. This is when the whole thing happens where he declares himself the new Messiah, that he is Yahweh. Like I said, according to the Miami Herald, at one point, they estimated his real estate holdings and fortune of the Nation of Yahweh at $100 million. He owned a huge temple, 4-story apartment building, restaurants, stores, houses, hotels in Miami and in Atlanta, as well as hundreds of white cars. They had Cadillacs and Lincolns, and they had vans, buses, and 18-wheeler trucks.
The Yahweh's portfolio of business holdings is now believed to total in the millions of dollars. In fact, here in front of the Temple of Love are about a half a dozen white Lincolns and Cadillacs. Part of the federal investigation was aimed at finding out where the Yahwehs got the money.
He is really embraced by other community leaders. Like, he went back to the Nation of Islam, and they were together, joking about the Jew and the Muslim are friends.
Those who think that Jews and Muslims can't get along, you better look here. This is a Hebrew and a Muslim getting along as real well.
So now that I've given you the backstory, we're back to when he is arrested a month after getting a key to the city. He was charged with 18 instances of racketeering that included 14 killings, 2 attempted killings, extortion, and arson. And it is said that federal and state investigators spent millions of dollars and more than a decade, and they were tracking actually 20 homicides that they believed were linked to the cult. Robert admitted to the killings, so his incentive to cooperate was to get a reduced sentence, and that's also why some people discredit him. Okay, so now listen to this. Now, there were some strange deaths that occurred. The U.S. Assistant Attorney's secretary was murdered outside of her front door. His secretary, Pamela Crumpler, was shot to death at the front door of her Dade County home. This was a month after the trial was underway. Her sister-in-law said that she was coming home from work. She stopped to pick up food at the grocery store, and as she got to her front door, 3 men approached her and shot her once. And there was a witness that got run over by a train. The U.S. attorney, that's his secretary, he says, "We thought it was the Yahwehs. You can imagine our suspicion. But it was a botched robbery and nothing more than that. After that Friday, Yahweh came to me in the courtroom, which he usually didn't talk to me in the courtroom. Why am I saying courtroom? Courtroom. He came up to me that Monday morning. I remember it like it happened yesterday. He said, Richard, I didn't do this one. I always remember him saying, I didn't do this one. I thought that for him to come up and say that, he probably didn't do that one. Maybe it's just a coincidence. I don't know. I need my tinfoil hat, but I don't have it right now. During the trial, Robert was the star witness. And this didn't really work out too well because his credibility was the big question here. Is he just doing this to save himself? Did he act alone? During his testimony, they say that the people in the courtroom were gasping when he was telling the story about get me the white devil's ear. And they were like, oh my God. And then the prosecutor was actually going to bring out the ear, one of the ears that they had, and like show it. And then at the last minute, he changed his mind. And it says here, I'll read you the quote. It says, you can't imagine all the stuff that came out in trial. Some things were so bad that we didn't even show the jury. I thought they were too bad to show. I had one of the ears. It was enclosed in glass so I could make an exhibit out of it. Then I realized I'm not going to show people this ear. They say he decided to keep the ear tucked away in the vault. It was never shown. So other than Robert testifying, his sister, Yahweh's sister, ex-follower testified, his nephew testified, Amani testified, but then he also had tons of supporters that were there too. And then it was time for Yahweh Ben Yahweh to testify. And he said, you know, I predicted the holy war, the race riots, that it was going to be a race war, but I didn't have anything to do with any killing. He says, as the Prince of Peace, I look for peace for all people. It was time now for the jury to deliberate. And this is a whole other drama. They end up fighting and like they were almost going to have a hung jury. And then at the last minute, they come back with a verdict. They convicted Yahweh and 6 followers of conspiring to commit murder, but they acquitted 7 other followers of the same charge. And the reason why they had this issue and were deadlocked is because some of the jurors did not find Robert credible and others did. And that's mostly where they butted heads. He was sentenced to 18 years in prison, but he only did like between 10 and 11 years. So they said after the verdicts were read, the disciples that were there, that were supporting Yahweh, they came by and they all one by one kissed his hand. It actually helped the nation of Yahweh because they got all this publicity at the time. And, you know, people believed this was a setup, liked what they were hearing about what he did for the community, and they actually got more followers after he went to jail and all this happened with the trial. He was kind of leading from inside the prison. This is where the crazy thing happens with the money. There was a meeting in Montreal in Canada, a congregation of these Nation of Yahweh members. So they spent $400,000, a check from the Nation of Yahweh, which went through without a hitch. Where is this money coming from? Because they had to pay insane lawyer fees. Then they had to pay like restitution and like wrongful death lawsuits to the victims. It came to a point where some of the properties were getting foreclosed on. They were struggling with money during the trial. It was sucking all the money. So how, after the trial, when he's in prison, are they having this money? Well, the thing is, that's always been a question even for the members in there. Because this is what one member said, okay? All that money didn't come from selling Yahweh literature on the streets or Yahweh shampoo. I was close to the top of the organization and I never knew where the money came from.
Bankers say the Yahwehs once brought bags of cash into deposit.
Remember the U.S. attorney I told you about, the one whose secretary was killed? He says that he's heard that, this is the most bizarre thing I'm going to tell you, okay? He says, I will tell you a story that I've never told outside of law enforcement. We had 2 witnesses who refused to testify that told us that they were demonstration murders so that it would be recorded in records and in newspapers so that someone could tell that a group had done it, that Yahweh Ben Yahweh was doing it for Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. The Libyans were looking for a hit group to act on their behalf in the United States. According to 2 witnesses, that was when Yahweh Ben Yahweh met with certain religious figures. He was introduced to the Libyan agent and that they wanted to deal with someone more subtle. The murders, unbeknownst to people committing the murders, were demonstration murders for the Libyans to show that he could have people killed and have it done quietly. They say that the money started mysteriously floating into the Yahweh's bank account that the federal government could not trace. Not long after September 2001, after serving 10 years, he was released on parole. He was 65. The way the story ends here is that he was on parole and he was dying of cancer. He had prostate cancer and he was like at the end. And his lawyer basically asked the judge to stop having the parole visitation. Like, this guy's dying, let him die a free man, like take him off parole. And they did. He ended up dying in his sleep on May 7th in 2007 in Opelika, Florida. He was 71 and he said the government gave him cancer. That is the story of Yahweh Ben Yahweh and the nation of Yahweh, according to what I could find and what I saw. Thank you guys so much for watching. I was dying to talk about this with somebody, anybody. It's just like so crazy to me. But I hope this was informative. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you for watching. And thank you to Every Plate for supporting my channel. And I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.